Hi, Cris. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited about the conversation today.
And me too, because we're going to cover one of my absolute favorite topics, which is yoga philosophy. I am
Yes.
really excited to be able to have this conversation and share more of the beautiful philosophy behind yoga practice and what people typically know as the movements or going to a class, but to dive deeper into what is really behind all of those movements and what really started the practice in the first place. So I'm so excited to talk about this.
I totally geek out on that stuff, so
Yes.
I'm excited too.
So I always ask my guests just to give the audience a little background on you, kind of, who you are, what you do. You have a podcast, so you can tell us about that. You also have your own business. And kind of what brought you to, do those things. Those are a little bit out of the box things, right? It's not a 9 to 5 job. So something motivated you to decide you wanted to do those things. So tell us all about that.
Oh, it's such a winding road, isn't it, for us all?
Yes, it is.
And I think that we are such kindred spirits. When I was reading your bio too previously, talking about um, feeling that inner pull from a young age and not knowing what exactly it meant. I was raised in a Catholic family, but my
So was
parents were
I.
very open. Yeah, that's what when I was reading your bio, I'm like, she says origin. I wonder what that origin is. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know if you were as fortunate as I was. My parents were very open to what do you want to believe. So in sixth grade, they said to me, "You get to pick your faith now."
Oh,
So
wow.
I was very fortunate, and from sixth grade till my early 20s, I really dug into it. I read the Bible. I went to youth fellowship. I changed denominations from my parents. I really explored it and always felt there was something more. And so that's when I really started believing that I was more spiritual than religious. And so that's one of the ways that yoga came into my life, was learning the spirituality of it. That I saw so many people who went to church on Sunday, but they were Sunday people, but they weren't living that life the rest of the week. And that's what really spurred me into finding the openness of spirituality. And so my yoga practice is really where I've done that, and digging into living that essence every day of your life, not just the hour you're at church or the hour you're in yoga practice, but how can we bring that fully into our lives? So in 2020, it was actually before the pandemic, but it went through the pandemic. I decided to take a yoga teacher training because I wanted to dig deeper. I wanted to really connect deeper into that spirituality. So I took the yoga teacher training, never with an intention to teach, mainly with the intention to spend that time with myself. And I was in my late 40s. My son was graduating from high school. So there was a whole lot of changes coming on the horizon for us. Cue pandemic.
Mhm.
It was a lifesaver to go into that. And through doing my yoga teacher training, I uncovered so many layers. I started my own podcast, which is Grounding Journey, which is all about the journey. It also led me into creating several products. I have a yoga products. We have an online website, and we recently launched a monthly subscription box. So it's really everything I did for myself. I wanted to help be a guide and help lead others who were looking for that safe place and that safe space. And so that kind of led me into where I am now. And it was never a like, aha, this is what I've got to do. But every little moment was a spark along the way. And it's been a beautiful journey, and it's been rough, and it's been full of ups and downs, but it's been a journey that's been so fantastic and worth it.
Yeah. And I mean, so much. We are really kindred spirits. So I also grew up in a Catholic family, but a little bit different. They didn't offer up any option for any other type of faith or really encourage
Mm,
that in any way. And from a very young age, I felt deeply connected to something bigger than myself, but I didn't find that in the Catholic faith. So
mm,
there was this like dissonance
yes.
between what I felt inside and what I was experiencing on the outside. They didn't feel connected to me. But I've always been like a pretty good kid. And like when I was little and I listened to my parents and I thought, okay, well, they must be right. There must be something wrong with me. So I tried to make that religion work for me for years. I mean, really into my mid 30s, I was still trying to fit into that box. And questioning all along and asking questions and saying different things. And I actually happened to marry my husband, who's very Catholic as well. So I had all these like voices around me that were telling me, no, this is the right thing. And yet internally I was feeling like, no, it's not for me anyway. It's not the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to go against that grain, especially when you're a certain personality type, which I am. And, and it really took me until, and I experimented a little here and there with different Christian religions, but I really didn't go too far outside of the Christian space. But again, still just wasn't feeling what I wanted to feel, what I knew I had always felt, like intuitively felt. I was looking to find that in a community and a practice and a philosophy. And so when I was 35, I had my second child, my son, and we decided to baptize him because we had gotten married in the Catholic Church and we had baptized my daughter. And the whole idea of baptism, I personally am not behind, but you do what you do because this is family tradition. And it was not a good experience. My son screamed through the whole thing, cried hysterically. It was stressful. I was sweating bullets. Like the whole thing was just not a good experience. And that day, actually, ironically, the day of his christening, I said, I'm done. I'm done trying to fit into this box that I do not belong in. And I don't care what anyone else thinks. I'm done caring what my parents think or what my in-laws think or what my husband thinks or what my extended family thinks. Like I'm done with it. I need to be true to myself. And this is not true to me. But that still left me with like,
what is it?
Yes. That still left me like, what is it? And if you read my bio, after I had my son, I also started down the path of chronic migraine, which was very, very debilitating. And I had not been able to hear my intuition for a really long time. And then all of a sudden, my intuition was screaming at me, go to yoga, go to yoga. That's all I heard. That is all I heard. And I had dabbled in yoga. I had been in and out of yoga. And, with young kids, it's hard because there's no childcare and that kind of thing. But it'd been always something I was interested in. I did. And I had periods where I did it a little bit more and then I would pull back and not do it for a while and on and off. But I just had this voice inside me screaming, telling me to go there. And I listened. And the rest is history. That's where my true journey really began, is when I started, when, the knock at the door became so loud that I couldn't ignore it anymore.
Well, and so often I think that's what gets our attention, is the knock at the door being so loud, because otherwise it's easy in the hustle and bustle of every day to not hear the knock unless you've got really loud dogs barking at the door. Right. You don't hear it. That's why we've got doorbells, Right. So using that metaphorically and literally, it definitely, we have that calling. And until we're at that, I don't want to use the word crisis moment, but at that, our most uncomfortable moment, we don't always listen.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know if you watched Oprah growing up. I was a big Oprah fan growing up. And she used to say, life throws you a pebble. And if you don't listen, then it throws you a small rock. And then it throws you a larger rock. And then the boulder comes down the hill. You don't want the boulder, like listen before the boulder. But unfortunately, so much of the time we wait for the boulder before we do what we intuitively knew we should have been doing all along, but we were not paying attention to what was going on inside of us. We were paying too much attention to the world around us.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that yoga brings us to is, you said your intuition was leading you. I know where my intuition has been, but we second guess that. We let those be doubts. And one of the beautiful parts about yoga, when you step outside of the asanas, when you're not just focused on the movement, is we find that trust, we find that divine within ourselves. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about religion versus spirituality. And, I pray every day. I pray in the morning, I pray at night. I use the word God. Sometimes I use the word higher power, so whatever word resonates, but it's that finding the divine within us, because in religion, we're taught to pray outside of us, where in spirituality, I think it brings us to that, um, those essence that we would pray to are available within us, those strengths, those qualities. And so, as you mentioned, the intuition, it's allowing the intuition to speak and having the trust and the faith in ourselves.
Yeah,
But I did not know that Oprah thing. I like that one. I'm going to
yeah, like
definitely
that.
use that one again.
Yeah, I try to remind myself regularly, don't wait for the boulder, Katie. Don't wait
Yes.
for the boulder. And I think what's beautiful about the asana practice, and when I showed up in yoga, and I think you can speak for yourself, but I think it's really common when people show up for a yoga class, that is the entry point. You're
Mhm.
coming for that, for the physical movements of the practice, whether it to be to stretch or to strengthen or just to feel a little more relaxed or whatever your, physical reasons are for coming to the practice. But if you practice long enough and if you were fairly steady in your practice, I think what starts happening is the rest of it kind of creeps in. It starts seeping in,
Mhm.
right? The Dharma talks start seeping in. For anyone who doesn't practice yoga, talk is like a little talk usually that a yoga teacher gives at the beginning of the practice based on some form of yogic philosophy. And it's pretty short. It's very digestible because it's just the few minutes that they have at the start of the practice. But it starts creeping in and it starts making you think a little bit and it starts making you wonder a little bit. And usually if you're in a yoga studio that is heavy on philosophy or really basing their practice on philosophy, it's also a very loving,
Mm.
non-judgmental, supportive environment. And so I think in that space, when you're on your mat enough, that voice inside starts to get louder
Mhm.
and you can hear it better than at least for me, this is my experience. I started being able to hear it so much better. And at first I could only hear it better on the mat, but
Right.
eventually I was able to translate that to hearing it better off the mat as well in my everyday life when things were not loving and supportive and quiet and still. And then it becomes like a muscle that you train. So when you hear it on the mat, you think, wow, that was really powerful. You take it off the mat, you start integrating that into your everyday life, and then you see how well your life starts working out when you do that. And then you
Yes.
think, I'm going to do that again and again. And the voice gets louder and it gets easier each time to follow it than it was before.
Absolutely. And I think it also depends on what kind of yoga you start with.
Hmm.
Uh, in my early 20s, my best girlfriend, we were friends from 17 until, had a call yesterday because she's moved away. Um, but we were doing yoga on pieces of paper in my living room because she was taking a yoga class in college. And it circled back into our lives in our 30s. And it was funny. We both had a Y membership and we lived near each other. So we went to the 9 o'clock Tuesday, Thursday Y, which we were the only people under 60 in the class. And it was great because it was
Yeah.
really slow, steady
Yeah.
movement yoga. And our instructor did an amazing job setting the space. So it called for that quietness. I've been to studios where it's fast vinyasa poses and it doesn't give you time to think because
Hmm.
you've got to focus so much on your body so that you don't fall out of tree pose or something. And so there's just so many different types of yoga that you can try. So I offer that to anybody who's listening and says, I didn't get any of that from yoga. There's so many different types of classes and different teachers. If you haven't found that in yoga yet, try a different teacher, try a different studio, go on YouTube. My practice has mainly been home practice. that just works for me because I get to hold the poses as long as I want to so that I can stay in that space. But I do want to offer that up to people who may, religion's not for everybody, yoga's not for everybody, meditation, that's why there's lots of
Right.
meditation teachers, there's lots of yoga teachers. Keep searching for that right person.
Yes, I 100% agree with that because, and I've tried a lot of forms of yoga. I don't want to say all forms, but I've tried a lot of forms from, hot yoga to Bikram yoga to Kundalini yoga to Vinyasa yoga. I mean, there's so many different kinds out there, and I've tried so
Mhm.
many of them. And there are ones that, as much as I love yoga, there are ones that speak to me, and there are ones that do not speak to me.
Yes.
So yes, keep trying if you feel, and if, if anybody's feeling that internal pull, like I think that might be for me, but you go to a studio and you're like, oh no, that was, that wasn't for me, then that's okay. Yes, I totally agree with you. Try the next studio type, try the next type of yoga, maybe try a studio that offers a lot of different kinds of yoga, or like you said, going online and trying it. But
Mhm.
yes, there's so many different flavors and you do have to find your flavor, what works for you.
Absolutely. And what I love about YouTube is you can be 5 minutes into the video and be like, nope, this isn't working,
Yeah.
and try another one
Yes.
instead of being stuck there for an hour miserable.
Yes. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I do. And everybody's so different. Like to me, I don't ever practice at home, which is really funny
Mm-hmm.
because I am so into yoga, but there is so much distraction in my house between my kids and my dog and the phone ringing, and my husband works from home and people are knocking on the door, and so on and so forth. We have a very busy household. And so I can't really go internal because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much going on. But also, I would say that I do love my studio. My listeners will know I talk about my studio all the time. Um, I love the energy that other people bring to the studio.
Mm-hmm.
I love the sense of community and breathing together, like we
Yes.
all are breathing in and breathing out, kind of in unison as we're moving along this practice. And I'm a firm believer in community. I stress community a lot. That's a big part of
Mm-hmm.
this podcast, as well as developing community. And you can find a group of very like-minded people who feel the same way about how they view the world. And so that's a beautiful
Yes.
piece to it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I
So
love
how
that.
did you decide? You said you decided to take the teacher training just for yourself, which actually I did too. I do teach. I wound up teaching, but ultimately when I originally decided to sign up, I just wanted to dive deeper into the philosophy, and I took it for myself. So what was it like? Had you been practicing a lot, or how did you come to decide? I mean, it's a big commitment. Yoga teacher training is, it's long and it's expensive. And so how did you come to decide that you wanted to place your time and energy and finances in that direction?
So this is probably not the best story. I feel like I'm really red saying this story. Um, so my story goes, I mentioned that I took yoga at the Y with my best girlfriend, and we did that for probably 2 years. Um, this is the girl who married my husband and I was her maid of honor. We've been inseparable all our lives. She lived 5 minutes away from me. She moved 2 hours away. I stopped going to the yoga the week she moved and did not realize what a deep depression I went into just missing her. I mean, it wasn't like a full deep depression, but I stopped doing yoga. I missed her. And it was 2 years, I think, give or take. And another friend of ours started teaching at a local studio, and she taught at noon on Tuesdays. So I decided I'm going to go just to support that friend because it's a noon class. She maybe had 4 people. And talking about listening to your intuition, um, she just happened at the end of class say, "Oh, they're starting a teacher training here next week. Anybody who's interested?" And I felt this full body yes. And it was so unusual. And you said it's expensive, it's a commitment, and we have lots of doubt and we second guess ourselves. So I reached out to the teacher who was doing it. Um, they had a monthly payment or a paid in full. I paid in full that day because I had to
Wow.
commit because I knew it had been such a full body yes for me. But I knew if I gave myself time to second guess it, I would back off.
Yeah.
Um, I will say though, through the teacher training, it was intense. The layers it pulled back, the experiences that I went through, the friction that it created in the class, um, it was all part of the journey. And there was a reason, a lesson, and experience in it. And it broke me open so that it allowed for more. And the teacher training that I took, it was just your basic 200 hours. So it really did not focus on any of the spirituality that I had hoped it would.
Mm.
I didn't know the teacher before. I'd never even been to one of her classes before I signed up for it. I just knew it was a full body yes for me. Um, so I did a lot of self-study on my own. So where I say it broke me open, it cracked me open. It showed me the light that this is where you need to focus right now. And when you're cracked that wide open, you either have the choice to stay raw or to heal through it. And that's what I chose. So through that, we did the yamas and the niyamas very quickly in class. We did the whole yamas in 1 month and the niyamas in another month. We maybe spent an hour, the entire thing, talking about it. So it was a lot more digging in for me. And I guess that's the difference too, is that I do yoga practice at home because it's a lot of self-study for me,
Mhm.
versus the community. I would love the community, but I just could not find it. I couldn't connect with it
Yeah.
because the studio I was at was very much a physical studio. It was not a spiritual. Um, so it was just really neat to find the books, to find the people online, and to build my own community through it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And that full body yes is, I love the way you say that. Because it's a full body yes. Even when you start reading some of these books,
Hmm.
you're it's so hard to explain. So I don't know if you're familiar with Eckhart Tolle. Do you know
Of
who he is?
course.
Okay.
Yes.
So I had tried to read him when I was in my maybe like late 20s. And because I always had this, this piece of me, this seeker spirituality piece.
Hmm.
And so I tried to read some of his books and I was like, I do not know what this man is talking about. I do not understand like this. He was like the peanuts speaking to me. Like I could not understand at all. So I wound up giving up on it. And then years later, someone mentioned something about him again. And they mentioned a book of his. And Oprah, again, I come back to Oprah. She's obviously had a large influence in my life as she keeps coming up in this conversation. But she took one of his books, and every week, Eckhart and Oprah would discuss a chapter in the book. And it was just like a podcast that would come out once a week. And I listened to it, and it was every word. I was like, oh my God, yes, yes, yes. Like it was that
Hmm.
full body yes.
Yeah.
And it feels good. It feels like you're not alone. It feels like all this stuff that I've been feeling and feeling like maybe there's something wrong with me for thinking and feeling these things because no one else seems to be thinking and feeling them. I'm not alone. There are other people out
Right.
there. Yeah. Which is
Yeah,
sweet.
and that's the beauty of the time that we're in now, is that we do have access to podcasts. We have access to Zoom. We have access to group chats and things because we can build our own community when you can't find it outside of, it's hard to build a community in car line at school
Right.
or, especially when you're talking spirituality, because that's such a vulnerable place
Mhm.
that it's hard to be open to that. And I know for me, when I was going through my yoga teacher training, I was 44, 45, and I was the oldest by far. So
Mhm.
there was just no connection for me. I tried and tried, and then finally knew I was trying to force it. And so that it was my moment of reflection, just to be there and to feel the space and to watch the energy change. And that's one of the things we get to build our own communities now that we haven't been able to do before.
Yeah, we absolutely can. It is really a beautiful time to be alive right now, to be able to
Hmm.
do that. It really is. So how has, and you mentioned actually before we got on the call that you also did your 300-hour training, which is on my bucket list. I'm definitely planning to do that as well, and primarily for the fact that it dives much deeper into the philosophy,
Yes.
which is so interesting to me. And so how has all of the knowledge that you've gained of the philosophy, as well as the practice, the physical practice itself. Do you meditate? Are you a meditator?
Huge
Huge
meditator.
meditator. Okay. So
Yeah.
all of that, how has that influenced your life? How has it improved your life? How has it helped you get through difficult things? Like, what would you say this these practices have done for you in your life?
I I love that question. I love that conversation because it hasn't improved. There's a quote, and I know I have it somewhere around my room, but it says, "Yoga doesn't improve your life. Yoga improves you so that you can deal with life better." And it's definitely given me a strong toolbox. It's given me the resources that when life gets tough, because I, like you, have been through some real health struggles with my son. He's 23 now. We almost lost him at 18 through some mental health stuff. It gave me the tools to be able to keep grounded through that so that I could keep doing it. And, at 23 now, he comes home and, "Hey, mom, have you got a good meditation you can give me?" You know, so it's given me the tools. It's also given me this place of love and compassion to come through that. And 300 hours is definitely all about the spiritual practice. And it's been interesting because as I went through the 300, because I was not, again, doing it for to be a teacher, I was just doing it for my own spiritual practice. My actual asana practice fell away. So it was not that I was on my mat every day. It was that I was reading the Bhagavad Gita. It was that I was studying the yamas and the niyamas, that I was really bringing yoga into my life and understanding that yoga was a philosophy thousands of years before it was a practice, and that practices are less than 150 years old. So it's really neat to lean into what is a fire ceremony. Oh, they've been doing fire ceremonies and using ash for 2, 3, 5,000 years. So connecting to other practices outside of that physical practice
Yeah.
of connecting to my chakras and my subtle bodies and my energy bodies. It has, in fact, opened up kind of more of the empath of me, which has been a challenge because when you dig that much into um, energy work, you also have to learn how to protect yourself so that that energy doesn't totally overwhelm you. And um, I'm famous in my house for putting crystals through the washer or having so many crystals stuck in my bra that when I take my bra off at night, you're dunk, 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 because I forget they're in my bra, so it's led to lots of other resources that I've really had fun digging into and picking what resonates for me and leaving what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everything you said there was just so spot on for me as well. Everything. I mean, you know, went through challenges, mental health challenges with my daughter as well. And it was a
Mhm.
very long road and there was a
Yes.
lot of decisions to be made. And the decisions were difficult. There were no
Yeah.
clear right or wrong answers ever.
Mhm.
Um, and so I felt like my practice allowed me to stay grounded, I think is the word that
Yes.
you also used. So that, yes, I was extremely concerned about my daughter and fearful about, what could happen. But there was still a very large piece of me that was calm despite everything that was going on. And
Right.
from that place of calm, grounded energy and having practiced for years over and over and over, strengthening that muscle of intuition,
Yes.
I was able to make choices that I felt were the right choices, even though there was no way to know whether they were the right choices,
Right.
but they felt intuitively like the right choices. And so I don't think anyone can do that. When your nervous system is so out of whack, when it's so on
Mhm.
fire, because of the amount of stress in your body, and everything's foggy. Making
Yeah.
decisions is very difficult because your brain is kind of jumbled up and you can't hear your intuition and you're spinning essentially. And I was able to be the calmness in the center of the storm despite everything that was going on. And I 100,000% attribute that to my yoga practice, which involves everything, not just the asana, the meditation, the breath work, the philosophy, all of it. And I also really believe that it helped to heal my daughter. I
Mm-hmm.
think that she was able to feel the steadiness inside of me, and was that energetic was palpable for her, and that it helped her
Mm-hmm.
believe that she would also get to the other side. So I really, it's so profound what this practice can do in your life,
Yes.
when you really take it in and allow it to be what I call living yoga, which is,
Yes.
yoga off the mat. It's not something that
Yes.
you just do for an hour or a couple times a week. It's something that is how you live your life and how you interact with yourself and with others. And that brings us back to the other thing you said, which is, opening you up to all this compassion and love. I mean, it's wild. It does crack you open in that way,
Yeah.
how you just feel so interconnected with everyone, even people who might get under your skin a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You can still just see the humanity in someone, even when their outside behaviors are challenging. Um,
Yes.
and it's like you can see the face of God in every person walking around, and you can't hold hate in your heart when you can see the face of God in their face. And my daughter, who's very empathic and has been from a very young age, it's so funny. I give her all these crystals to stick in her bra.
That's why you laughed so hard when I said that.
Protect yourself, because it's a superpower, but it's like a skill you have to learn on how to
Right.
use the superpower, or else you can really be swallowed up
Yes.
by taking in everybody else's emotions.
Well, one of the things too, I think, and I tried to find it, my binder from my 300 hours is like huge. Uh, and I don't remember if it was a Yoga Sutra, but one of them, I remember years ago, my husband saying to me that I was just a little too judgy of people. And, you know, I'll own that because I definitely judged people I knew based on what I thought they should be doing at the moment. And I wasn't judging people I didn't know. Like, I wouldn't look at you if I didn't know you at Walmart and be like, God, why is she wearing those shoes? But I would definitely judge my close friends of like, why did she turn right instead of left? Uh, and one of the ones that I read was all about being happy for people, being happy for them no matter what their choices were. If they were happy, then you should be happy for them, not judge their choices. And I think it's in the Yoga Sutra twos, but I couldn't find it quickly. Um, and that made such a difference for me because, I've got this friend who's making some choices that are not the same I would make, but he seems really happy right now. And it was funny at Thanksgiving dinner. He didn't come to Thanksgiving dinner this year. And it was, my parents and my husband's parents, and they all know this friend because he's been friends with all generations of our family. And they started gossiping about him for the choices he was making. And I so quickly said, nope, he's happy. Like, we're happy for him for being happy. And it was one of those profound moments for me of like, oh my gosh, I really am walking the walk
Right.
because I didn't dig in with them into what they were saying. I called everybody back out.
Yeah.
And it was amazing how the whole conversation changed and the whole room changed and the feel changed. And so I try so hard to live by that. And my husband and I were just having the conversation the other day about he was judging somebody and I called him out on it. And he's like, that used to be you. I'm like, uh-huh. And it's not anymore, right? And he's like, when did you stop? So it's one of those, it's just kind of like, when you're practicing yoga asanas, you don't get into tree pose the first time. The first time you may have your foot slightly on your ankle, and then it comes up to your leg, and then it comes up to your thigh. It takes time to work through it and to get better at it. Just like living the yoga philosophy takes time, but one day you suddenly have inner foot on your inner thigh. And you're like, holy crud, I'm fully in tree.
Right.
It's like for me, it was holy crud. I'm suddenly really living the yoga philosophy of do no harm, and that's how it just slowly comes into your
Seeps
life.
in. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
amazing.
It really, really is. And, for me to like piggyback on that, you have this friend who's making choices that you don't think are the best choices. And then you think like, oh, that's really going to swing back on them at one point. And, and partially there's a part of you, a part of most people, I think that, you want to save that person from
Hmm.
that choice that's
That's
going
another
to,
one. Yep.
yeah, swing back on them. But you realize that this is that person's journey, and
Yes.
you have to allow them to have their journey. And there's a reason why they're having this journey, and they're meant to learn that lesson, whatever it is that they're going to hopefully learn from that
Yes.
experience. And so you can wish them well, you can send them loving thoughts, you can certainly not judge them, be happy for them if they're happy in the moment, but also know that you're not their savior. You don't need to save them. Their choices are their responsibility, not yours. And this is the path that they were meant to walk. And
Mhm.
it's a sense of relief. It's really a sense of, um, I don't know, just trust. It's a different level of
Yes.
faith and trust that people are meant to walk the path that they're walking, even if it's a hard one. And if they are open and willing, they will gain so much from walking that path. I'm sure what you went through with your son, I know what I went through with my daughter. No one would want to walk that path ever.
Mhm.
However, there was so much depth and so
Yeah.
much growth that came from that experience, as has come from every hard experience I've ever experienced. So it's being willing to see that, and accept that there is beauty in every experience, even if it's a really hard one.
Well, and I think one of the words I want to highlight that you said is trust.
Mhm.
Because, and I can take this into my child's relationship or into friendship relationship. When Kevin was going through what he went through, I had this vision of bowling, the little bumper guards. I was the bumper guard. So he didn't end up in the gutters, but he had to bounce back and forth on the lane and figure it out. And he knew that I was always there when he needed me. And that's kind of where I want to be with friends, is that because ironically, the same friend that I'm talking about showed up last week asking for advice. And I had never given it to them in the 2.5 years they've been through this experience. And because I had never given it to them, I said, are you sure you want to hear what I have to
Yeah.
say? Or do you just want me to listen to you? And he
Right.
said, I think I want you to listen. Okay. That's one of the things with Kevin. I always say, do you want mom? Do you want a friend, or do you just want an ear? And I make him define it before the conversation starts. So I know which
Fantastic.
role I'm playing. Well, at 23, you have to walk that line so that you
Yeah.
stay in good graces. Um, but back to the word trust, you have to have that trust. Because if I try to do it for Kevin, or I try to do it for this friend, I'm not trusting their journey. I think, and that's ego,
Mhm.
that's thinking that my ego knows what's better for them than their own journey. And that's where it's trusting yourself, it's trusting their journey, it's trusting the universe, it's trusting God, it's trusting higher power, it's trusting whatever you find. And I'll tell you, yoga, thank you, God, for bringing it into my life, because that's where I learned trust.
Mhm.
And it's silly
Mhm.
as it sounds, I learned to trust my body and how it felt. So once I really learned how to trust my body, I started using my body as my own compass.
Mhm.
So it's sometimes hard to trust your intuition when you're thinking the thoughts and you don't know, is that my intuition speaking or is that my ego speaking? But when you've connected so deeply with your body through yoga, and for me, that came more from yin practice, where you're just holding that pose for minutes and minutes and you're really feeling that release and feeling what it feels like, being able to ask my body, show me what yes feels like right now. What does no feel like right now? And then asking the question, because now I trust my body in a way I never did before. And that's been another real gift, that deepening my yoga practice beyond just, yeah, I'm talking about the asanas, but it gave me a connection to my body that then gave me a trust in my body to be able to feel it more, see it more, hear it more.
Yeah. So every word, so true. So many times during this conversation, I have full body chills, hair is standing up all over my body, because
Yes.
my body is recognizing the truth of what you are speaking, right? It's talking about trusting your body. Our bodies are so intuitive, so much more intuitive than our minds, and that exactly
Yes.
what you described is so spot on. It's you when we're always up in our heads, we can't tell, is that our brain, our ego speaking to
Right.
us, or is that really an intuitive thought that popped into my head? But when you are in touch and connected, deeply connected with your body, you can feel it, and you can definitely know the difference between those two things. But it does take developing that connection and, becoming intimate with your own body
Mm-hmm.
and what it's trying to tell you. And I love your bumper analogy. I love a good analogy. I'm like I
Yeah.
geek out on analogies, because sometimes these philosophical things are a little hard to like wrap your brain around. And
Right.
then, so if you can put this like visual in that is so on point and so easy for people to understand, I love that, because it just helps drive the point home. But the idea,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt the same way with my daughter. I feel like, I mean, especially when she was going through her struggles, but I feel this way in general about parenting. And there are a lot of moms listening to my show, because, we focus on
Mom.
moms.
Yeah.
And, when I was growing up, my parents always wanted to tell me what was right and what was wrong. They were very strong about what was right and what was wrong. And they were trying to do their best for me, right? They were trying
Mm-hmm.
to raise me up well. They were trying to guide me, that kind of thing. But what it left was my inability
Mm.
to know what was right or wrong, to hear my intuition, to feel internally what was right or wrong. It also left me with a fear of making the wrong decision, which we all know there actually are no wrong decisions to make at this point. I know that. But I grew up feeling like it's black, it's white, it's right, it's wrong. I don't want to do the wrong thing. And so, as much as, my parents' heart was in the right place, I have chosen to parent differently. And I parent
Yes.
more with the bumper car analogy, where I'm going to allow you to make your own choices, make your own decisions, feel to what feels right for you. But I'm the bumper car, right? I'm going to make sure you don't go
Mm-hmm.
completely off the rails. I'm going to provide support for you when you need that support. But I will not tell you what is right and wrong. I will not tell you what decision to make. I will be there to listen to you and talk you through it. And, if you want my advice, I love that. I'm going to use that. Do you want me to be your mom, your friend, or what was the third one? Or just listen.
Uh-huh.
But it's really hard. I mean, as a parent, there's this, I feel like, impulse to want to tell your kid what you think the right thing is to do. So
Mhm.
it's not easy, but I do think that it sets them up for a lifetime of being able to follow their own intuition, which is a gift that we can give our kids.
Yeah, and I mean, I won't say when Kevin was 11, I gave him the choice. When he was 11, it was do this, do that, clean your room. It was just as he got older, and as I said, he's 20. I say he's 23. I think he's 22. Yeah, he's 22 now. He'll be 23 in a couple months. Um, so as he's gotten older and he's proven that he's got a good mind and that he is rational and that he has watched me and learned, it's a lot easier to say, what do you need right now? And by asking him what you need right now, it's built a true confidant with him that when the stuff gets tough, he knows he can come to me because I'm not going to immediately force my opinion on him.
Mhm.
I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to play the role he needs. Um, and that's, I'm 5 years into him being an adult, basically. Um, So it's been a beautiful journey with him. And I think a lot of that really has come from living the yamas and the niyamas and really experiencing those difference of the non-harming, the non-judgment, um, and bringing that into a way of life. And
So
sometimes it's hard.
yeah, it is hard. It is hard. And I think, and we can do this from a pretty young age. We can allow our kids to have a lot of autonomy, and that autonomy
Right.
grows with time, obviously, right?
Yes.
Your 1-year-old is not going to have the same autonomy as your 10-year-old, as your 20-year-old. But it is something that I think that we can weave into our parenting from a very young age, and just continue to give them more and more leeway and space to make choices for themselves. So I see your dog in the background, who's so cute, by the way. Sorry, I'm a little obsessed with dogs. So let's get into the yamas and the niyamas a little bit. Do you want to like talk about those, what they are, maybe one or two that you find the most impactful in your life?
Yeah, I love that. And it's so funny you noticed my dog because she's been in the back. She's 13 and she's been in the background snoring this whole time. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh, I hope you can't hear her snoring
I
on the
couldn't
mic.
hear her. She stood up and like did her little turnaround to find a better position. And that's when I saw her.
Yeah.
She's so cute.
Yeah, that's funny. It's a brown chair for everybody listening, and she's a dark dog. So it's only when she stands up you see her gray face. And it
Yes.
startles people sometimes because the chair just suddenly stands up behind me. But sorry. Yeah, and we have 2 other dogs, so I'm all about dogs. We could have a whole podcast just about
We have a
dogs.
whole podcast on dogs. I frequently say to my husband, is it bad there is more pictures of Hunter, that's our dog, on my social media than our kids? I don't know.
Yeah. I love that. I was looking to tell you which one it was that I wanted to talk about. Oh, okay. It's the first one. So the yamas and the niyamas are basically, I'm going to break it down, and anybody who's really religious is going to be offended by me, and I'm so sorry. But I'm going to say they're the 10 commandments equivalent. Uh, if you want to go that way, just to make, another analogy to connect it with something. Um, so I have this amazing book called The Yamas and the Niyamas, and it's by Deborah Adele. It's a super easy book to read. I would highly recommend it to anybody. But my first one is my favorite, and I can't speak the right words. I'm always afraid to say it because I think I'm going to butcher the language. I'm going to say it's Ahimsa. I don't know.
Ahimsa.
AHIM. Yes, thank you.
Ahimsa.
I'm
Mhm.
so bad at that. But it's nonviolence. And so when we immediately think about nonviolence, we think, it's a violent world. People are doing crimes against each other. And when I really dug into it, to me, what nonviolence is it incorporates everything. It's non-judgmental, it's non-harming, it's being kind to yourself. And it's not just nonviolence to somebody else, it's nonviolence to yourself. And I think that we are, air quote, the most violent to ourselves because we talk bad to ourselves, we judge ourselves, we restrict our diets, we, say bad things about our bodies to ourselves. There's so many things that we, in a sense, are violent to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first one for me. And it was a huge gateway for me into being more loving and compassionate. So even though it translates to nonviolence, for me, it was finding that compassion and the compassionate for myself so that I could give it to others. Mm-hmm. And as moms, and I've said my son's 23. He just moved 22. I don't know why I keep saying 23. He just moved out 2 months ago. So he's been home. So I'm like brand new empty nesting. And so I'm at that stage of going from being a super involved mom. And I was a single mom for several years. My first husband was an alcoholic. He was my high school sweetheart. We were together almost 20 years. I left him when my son was 11. I was 35. I am married now to an amazing man who has been Kevin's. He actually adopted Kevin last year at 22, 21. So I've run this gamut of being this mom of being so involved. There was a point I worked 3 jobs, you know. So I've done that gamut of being a mom, and now suddenly I've got to figure out what's next. Like, who am I and how can I talk better to myself? How can I find that confidence and focus on myself? And because it's really easy when you're a mom to forget about yourself because you're totally focused on your children. And that's your sacred assignment at the moment, is to be that mom, to be the best mom you can be. And so that sacred assignment for me is ending and the next sacred assignment is starting. And after 2 years of that being my sacred assignment, finding the nonviolence in myself, of loving myself and experiencing what this next journey in life is. And that was like 3 subjects right in one, but that's kind of where I am right now. Um, and so that's the one that I really love. And then I always come back to is I change it to non-harming. I think I've said it a couple times in the conversation, and that's actually what I was referring to, is those moments of loving yourself for the ups, the downs, the mistakes, the rights, whatever you judge them as, whatever you decide they are, because every experience got you to right here and right now. And that's where we're supposed to be, is learned through those moments. And that's part of the philosophy, I think, is that you can look at those experiences and not go, well, I totally begungled that one. But you can say, now that I know better, I'll do better.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. When I first read that book that you're speaking of, I at first was like, oh yeah, like of course, nonviolence. I'm not violent. I'm not a violent person. But when you start really reading it and what it means, you find that we're all violent, actually.
Yes.
In certain ways that we probably wouldn't classify as violence in our society because we're not physically harming somebody else.
Right.
But it's a thought, it's a judgment, it's even fear is a way of being violent towards yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, it's much deeper than what we typically think violence to be. And so when you do start dissecting it down to all these little ways that you were inflicting harm on yourself or somebody else, it really wakes you up, which is what the process of yoga is, right? Waking up.
Right.
It's the process of really waking up from the dream of what we think reality is and trying our best to see reality as it is. And I love that. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. It is the process of waking up.
And we wake up and go back to sleep, right? There are moments where I know I'm awake, and then moments where I didn't know I was asleep or I wouldn't have done it. But then afterwards, I'm like, whoo, really slept through that one. It was a moment where I lost my awareness. I wasn't in my body. I was probably acting from subconscious thoughts. And it's an in and out, and it's a practice. And again, comes back to that ahimsa. We can't be violent towards ourselves for having a moment of going back to sleep, because it's just part of the process.
It absolutely is a part of the process. And it's that moment that we get to make conscious choices. So when we become aware that we are asleep, we get to choose to come back to ourselves. And I think that's one of the places that so often we beat ourselves up over, oh, I did it again. Oh, I can't believe I knew better. Okay, you did. So choose differently next time. And that's where it's so much about the conscious choice that we get to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like meditation, when you're sitting in meditation and you're focusing on whatever you're doing, your breath or a mantra or whatever it is. And then you are off in your thoughts, and then you come back, and then you're off in your thoughts, and then you come back. You're waking up and you're going to sleep. You're waking up and you're going to sleep. And there is no need to judge that practice, right? It's just exactly as it says, a practice, and we'll get better over time. And judging ourselves will only prevent us really from getting better at the practice. It won't help us to get better at the practice.
And it I don't know what word I want to use. It depletes our effort when we judge ourselves for it. When we honor, okay, I'm human because I'm in this physical body. I can't be spiritual all the time. So when we honor that we're human and we get off track, or our mind wanders, or we forget, that is honoring our spirituality more in my eyes, because we're allowing that spirituality and the humanness to be together, and that there's a harmony between the two, instead of thinking we have to be spiritual and when we become human we're wrong. There's a harmony between the two. That's where the whole yin yang sign is there's a harmony for us all.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely. All right, well, we have a few minutes. Give me one more that you really love.
Oh, okay. Let me flip the book back open. That one's always my favorite. And I guess, for me, it would probably be a toss up between either non-stealing or self-study.
Okay. You're not feeling pulled towards either one of those. Let's talk about, if you don't mind, I would go with non-stealing,
Okay.
just because I think that's another one where when you hear the words non-stealing, you think, well, I don't steal. I'm not, I'm not a burglar. So describe for people what that means in yoga philosophy, non-stealing.
So for me, what I interpreted it was, it's non-stealing. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier about trusting somebody else's journey. So it's not stealing their experience. It's not stealing. It could go into not stealing from the earth by being more conservative, which is deep at my heart, of conservation and honoring our ancestors. As I said, it could be non-stealing, allowing others to experience what they need to experience. It's living in that state of mind. I think sometimes people get so competitive that they think, I can't share a resource with you because then there won't be enough for me. And so that's, to me, non-stealing is believing that there's enough of everything for everyone. And so sharing the prosperity, sharing the abundance so that we all have it, instead of trying to hoard it and keep it for yourself. So I think those would be my two the first one would be non-stealing, of not trusting others' experiences and letting them have it, and believing that there's enough abundance for us all. And abundance for me is not financial, it's love, it's experiences, it's, there's so many things that are abundant, that I would say. So those would be my top two interpretations. What are yours?
I have not looked at that book in a while. So run them down for me, and I'll be able to remember if you tell me.
You want the different categories?
Yes.
Okay. So there's nonviolence, there's truthfulness, non-stealing, non-excess, non-possessiveness. And then in the niyamas is purity, contentment, self-discipline, self-study, and surrender.
Oh,
that's a hard one.
There's so many that stand out to me. Okay. So contentment would be a huge one. And surrender, both of those, contentment and surrender, which kind of, to me, feel like they are sisters.
Yes.
Right? Because you're surrendering to what is exactly as it is. And that leads you to a sense of contentment with everything that is around you and in you and a part of you. And even, those things that are not desired, right, in your life, because we all have the things that are not desired in our life, but if we can surrender to them, we can still be content in the present moment, which is where all life exists, is in the present moment, and where we have such a hard time being. So those two stand out for me. And there was one that you said on the first category that I'm missing.
Truthfulness, non-excess, non-possessiveness.
Truthfulness stands out for me. Again, because I think it's one of those ones that we think like, well, I'm not lying.
Right.
But it has a much broader meaning than that. Than
Yes.
simply choosing not to bold-faced lie, right? So if we're not following our intuition, we're not being truthful to ourselves. If we're not following our passions and what we know is our purpose in our life, we're not being truthful. If we're pretending, if we're not listening to our own body and our own emotions, right? And that's non-harming, right? People
Right.
these are also related. So, you go to yoga class, let's say the asana practice, and you're really tired that day, and you happen to pick a teacher who's doing a really challenging practice, and you think you have to keep up with everybody in the class and do every pose that they're doing, and do just keep up. And it's really today, that day is not good for you to be doing that. Well, now you're harming yourself, and you're
Right.
also being untruthful. You're not being truthful about
Mhm.
where you are at that present moment in time. And so I think these are also interconnected. And that's one of the things that I love about it, is that they just get deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's what you find in, I feel like, yoga philosophy. Like, it's a never, you could study this from now until you take your last breath, and you will just keep getting deeper into it.
Yeah.
Which is so exciting and fun. I know I'm like such a geek, but
I
but
think I
yes,
called myself a nerd out on it like twice
yes.
already in the podcast, so I'm with you.
Yes. But the interconnectedness of it is like so beautiful. So yes, I think truthfulness is a huge one for me. And linking it to, the nonviolence, because really when you're not being truthful, you are being violent towards yourself. So
Mhm.
I love both of those. Yeah.
Yeah. They're
And I
good
will
stuff.
definitely put that book in the show notes. So if anyone who's interested can pick it up and read it. And you're right, it is not a difficult read. It is not like trying to read some other philosophy that I
The
really need some
sutras.
help with, into like the Bhagavad Gita. You mentioned that. I'm actually listening to a podcast right now that breaks down the Bhagavatam, which is another book. And I would never be able
Mm,
to read that on my own. I need this podcast to help me
yeah.
work through it. But the Yamas and Yamas is a really great book, and it is very, very digestible. So I'll put that in the show notes. I'll put your podcast in the show notes and your website and all that. So if people want to find you, they know how to find you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just to kind of give myself a little plug, if you
Yeah.
don't mind, since we're
Yeah.
talking about yoga and spirituality, if you go to my website, there's a really fantastic um, pop up that they can find. Pop up that says when meditation's not working. So while we've been talking about this so much, if you want to go to the website, it's a little class with some breathwork practices to help you quiet your mind and calm yourself so that you can connect a little bit better. So if you feel that the conversation that we've been giving feels over the top too much for you, then that's a great little opt-in that people might enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. Yes, I would. And I'll put all that stuff in there. And yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we've talked about a lot, and it's really only just actually a teeny tiny bit, but
Yeah.
it's still a lot. And it's a lot for someone who maybe this is a very new world to them, and no one comes in where we are, right? This is years of
Right.
working on this and doing heavy study
Yes.
and that kind of thing. So, just go to the first class maybe and see how you feel, or
Hmm.
just YouTube it and see how you feel, or just do a 2-minute meditation and see how you feel. We all started there. We all started with just that teeny tiny little practice that we felt somehow called to do. And from there, it just, it grew and it grew and it grew. So no one has to have it all figured out. We certainly don't have it all figured out, but it is a beautiful practice, and it will carry you
Yes,
through your life in so many beautiful ways. So just start small. Yeah.
absolutely. Asking the first question is the first step in the
Yeah.
journey.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned the word abundance, and we don't have time, but we could have a whole episode on abundance, which I think we actually will.
Mm,
So we can look forward to that in the future. Maybe I'll have you back and we can have a whole
yes.
conversation about abundance. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's another one I love to geek out on. I geek out
oh,
on the abundance, on the
so
nervous
good.
system. There's so many
Yes.
good things.
So many good things. So many good things. So
Yeah.
I look forward to it, and we'll do it again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun to have the conversation, and I look forward to having you on my podcast soon too.
Yes, I'm very excited. We can geek out more together.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye bye.